Saw dudes, I want to make it a habit to showcase my builds against level cap to show how valuable they are. While level cap is a mystery to most of the player base, I still find it fun to run and show off how strong a Warframe can be. Since I just released a Nekros Prime build, this level cap run will show off what he can do. Keep in mind that the footage you will see in the background is from 2 separate runs, as the first squad extracted before hitting level 9000. Let's get started. The Nekros Prime build is the same endurance setup that was featured in the last video. Remember that I am using Nourish over Soul Punch as my first ability. I am using Brief Respite for easy shield gating. Everything about this build is meant for comfort. Rolling Guard can be swapped out for Catalyzing Shields or Adaptation if you want. The Arcanes can be swapped out, but I highly suggest keeping Mo Augmented on to fully strip armor with Terrify. The Archon Shards I used are 2 Tauforge Violet Shards and 2 Tauforge Amber Shards. The Violet Shards granted a 30% equilibrium effect each, and the Tauforge Amber Shards drastically decreased the casting animation length of Nekros' abilities. In the primary slot, I used Latron Prime Incarnon. This was a weapon I was testing out, so the modding is not optimized in the slightest. The Incarnon perks I used were Riddle Target, Extended Volley, and Critical Parallel. This is a hunter munitions build meant to deal with fodder in hallways. It does not have elemental mods because Nekros has Nourish on him. In the secondary slot, I use the Laetum because it shreds through enemy overguard like nothing else. I use Marksman's Hand, Lethal Rearmament, Kaput Mortem, and Overwhelming Attrition as my evolutions. This build melts Thrax units quickly even when I'm spraying and praying. If you want to use the non-crit variant, go ahead, but it does do less damage to Acolytes. In the melee slot, I use Praedos, the usual. This is my comfort weapon, but I will likely switch off of it if I require more raw damage. The evolutions I used are Drifting Grace, Shockwave Synergy, Evolved Ascension, and Universal Readiness. It is a comfort build for the most part, but just use a prime version of the Bane mod for better results. Then there's the Panzer build. We don't really use this cat for viral spreading. Instead, it's used to buff our crit damage via Tenacious Bond. This is not required, but it does help with our scaling without having to use up precious weapon mod slots. The focus school I used was Unairu for the armor strip. While Terrify does armor strip in a massive AoE, it does not affect Acolytes, which is insanely annoying. If you don't need the armor strip, then you can use any other focus school you want. I think Vazarin and Madarai would be the next best options for safety and damage respectively. Finally, the amp I used was a 777 amp or Clamora Prism, Propa Scaffold, and Certus Brace. This amp is mainly used for its good crit stats. I may consider switching this out down the line because it did fall off later in the runs. I use Magus Melt, Magus Lockdown, Eternal Logistics, and Eternal Eradicate as my operator arcanes. These arcanes perform well and are easy enough to use in high stress situations. Here are my comments about the runs. While Nekros does pretty well, he can be annoying to play because the Shadow AI loves to block your shots. It isn't a massive issue, but it will come up occasionally so you have to reposition. Also, I don't recommend using the Latron to shred Overguard. Laetum performs so well against Overguard already that I had to use it after level 6000. Finally, you need to have Nourish up 24/7. Without it, you will be lacking in damage and your shadows will feel much weaker. Nourish actually affects the shadows and the explosion passive applies to them. I realize this run is not the best, but I would rather share my findings than keep them to myself and let you guys improve off of them and share in the comments. Let me know what you think, and as always, thank you for watching and happy farming.
Exolizer spent. Exolizer spent. Exalizer suppressed. Purge it before it makes the contamination worse. Keep any roaming threats away from that Exalizer. Shards. That'll make this Cascade work. Exalizer spent. We're down an Exalizer, working on backups. We just lost an Exalizer to possession. Get it back. The way the Exalizer works, clear them out to get the system working full speed. Spent Exalizer has been retired. Exalizer to possession. Get it back.
The angel is trying to retreat into the void so it can heal. Follow it and stop it.
Now the Exalizer. Any casualties contamination level up.
Can't hurt it while those dimensional orbs are out. Use your void body to absorb it.
Exalizer spent. Exalizer suppressed. Purge it before it makes the contamination worse. Exalizer has been retired. We're down an Exalizer. Working on backups. Cascade intensified. We just lost an Exalizer.